Hello friends, I am glad to see you again. Today I will talk about the homeowners association that is demanding the keys to my gate. Everyone warned me about homeowners associations, but I figured living on the far edge of one, behind my own cedar slat fence and a wrought iron driveway gate, would spare me the usual parade of nasty letters over mailbox colors and trash can etiquette. For the first 6 months in Bramblecrest Estates, that theory held. I landscaped in peace, stocked my backyard pond with speckled butterfly koi, and spent early mornings sipping coffee beside a low waterfall I'd built with river rock from a quarry 2 counties over. My nearest neighbor, a retired music teacher named Delilah, listened to the trickle through her open kitchen window and called it free therapy. The first crack in tranquility appeared when a glossy postcard showed up in my mailbox. Return address, Bramblecrest Master HOA, printed in a font that tried too hard to look friendly. Annual water feature compliance check, it announced. Below, in smaller print, board-approved aquatic life specialist will conduct inspections beginning at 5 a.m. to avoid heat stress on fish and plants. I chuckled, flagged the card with a neon sticky note that read "Nope," and tossed it in my junk drawer. The card said inspections were voluntary unless the pond exceeded 300 gallons or housed non-native species. Mine sat at 280 gallons and every koi was store-bought with paperwork. Case closed. 2 evenings later, as I lugged a sack of koi pellets across the yard, a woman in a blazer the color of wet cement walked up my driveway like she owned the concrete. She introduced herself as Margot, board chair acting compliance liaison. Her smile had no warmth, like someone practicing empathy with the wrong muscles. Margot told me the inspector preferred to enter through residents' side gates unimpeded and needed a key to mine because my pond might push the gallon threshold. Respectfully, I said, that gate's on my lot and padlocked for a reason. You can book a daytime appointment, knock on my door, and I'll unlock it. Margot's eyebrow arched. The inspection window is 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. We don't ring doorbells that early out of courtesy. Then it'll have to be another day, I replied. She scribbled in her clipboard, looked up, and gave a bob of the head nod that felt more like a threat than a farewell. That night, I emailed the HOA's general address. I do not consent to unsupervised access. My gate will remain locked. I am available weekdays after 7 a.m. Please advise another inspection time. I CC'd the property management company, mostly for sport. They never respond to anything before 3 reminders, but documentation is king when bylaws get ugly. The next morning, I woke to my phone buzzing at 5:12 a.m. caller ID, Bramblecrest HOA. Half asleep, I silenced it, rolled over, and felt smug. 20 seconds later, it rang again. Same number. On the 3rd attempt, I answered because I worried someone might have driven into my fence, or worse, one of the koi pumps had electrocuted a raccoon. A voice I recognized as Margot's launched into a pseudo-cheerful monologue. Good morning. As previously scheduled, our specialist is at your side gate. We can't complete the inspection. Would you be so kind as to provide the padlock code over the phone? I pictured her and some clipboard-wielding minion standing by my fence in the dawn chill. Not happening, I said. Per your card, inspections are voluntary. Mine's less than 300 gallons, remember? Margot cleared her throat hard enough to threaten laryngitis. Your refusal is noted. We may assess non-compliance fees. Have a lovely day. She hung up. I lay there, adrenaline pulsing, and decided this wasn't ending with a few threats. Margot just wrote the first line of a story she wouldn't enjoy reading. Coffee in hand, I reread the HOA's bylaws. Section 4.8a. Common area access shall not infringe upon residents' reasonable expectation of privacy. Section 6.2e. Inspection scheduling shall be mutually agreed upon except in emergent situations involving health or safety hazards. A pond smaller than a kiddie pool hardly qualified. I printed those clauses, highlighted them, and taped them to the inside of my gate for the next uninvited dawn visitor. But I also knew HOAs file threats by default. They count on residents shrugging and paying fines to avoid hassle. I'm the wrong mark for that. My day job is contract negotiator for an architectural glass firm. My life is black-letter law and the gray zones people exploit to get around it. I decided to treat the coming skirmish like a professional sparring session, except the prize would be my sleep and a front-row seat to some poetic consequences. That afternoon, I spoke with Delilah, who revealed the association had been stirring up drama all spring, demanding a fix-it plan for her pergola because lattice pattern not in harmony with neighborhood aesthetic. and sending violation notices to a family on Juniper Court because their teens played basketball in the driveway past 8 p.m. She asked if I'd seen the new board newsletter. I hadn't. She handed me a stapled packet headlined, "Preserving Our Unique Community." Buried on page 3 was a blurb about the water feature check, citing a recent rise in vector-borne disease and claiming early morning visits were scientifically supported best practice. The citations referenced a non-existent CDC memo. My ears burned. I opened a spreadsheet and started tracking every questionable clause, every empty citation, every resident complaint I could get my hands on. A pattern emerged. Most of the bullying originated from 3 people: Margot, her sidekick Bert, vice chair, part-time real estate agent, and Shelley, the treasurer, who apparently enjoyed hunting power in between yoga sessions. They voted as a block and railroaded anyone who questioned them. The other 2 board seats rotated often because sane volunteers quit after a single meeting. By dusk, my revenge muscles itched, but revenge without legality is vandalism dressed in bravado. I wanted them hoisted by their own bylaws, ideally in front of the same neighbors they'd been steamrolling. So I filed requests under the state's HOA record statute, which forces associations to let members inspect financials and meeting minutes within 10 business days. I drafted formal letters citing the statute, printed them on letterhead I kept for freelance gigs, and hand-delivered each to the management company's after-hours Dropbox. The security camera above the door gave a metallic click as it refocused. I smiled for the lens. 3 days later, I received an email from a board staffer named Janelle, who tried to delay the records review for 30 days. She claimed the board was understaffed. I replied, quoting the exact statute line limiting extensions to 5 days, and CC'd the State Department of Consumer Affairs. Funny how fast compliance follows when you carbon copy regulators. Janelle scheduled me for the following Tuesday at 9 a.m. While I waited, the 5 a.m. calls continued. Always 2 rings, always from the same number, always logged in my voicemail by the time I jerked awake enough to mute them. I saved each, complete with timestamp. Harassment statutes differ by state, but repeated pre-dawn calls from an entity with no emergency basis dance close to the threshold everywhere. I wanted at least half a dozen to show pattern, so I let the phone ring, documented, and brewed extra coffee. The night before the records inspection, I set the koi feeder to automatic and drove to my brother's place 2 towns over. Josh is a county sheriff's deputy. We joke that I read bylaws while he enforces the ones strong enough to arrest people. I asked about the calls. He reminded me I could request a stop harassment order through small claims court, cheaper and faster than civil litigation, especially if the calls were from an automated system, which HOA phone trees usually are. I filed that mental note away for later. First, I needed ammo. When Tuesday rolled around, I wore my most forgettable khakis and a polo in a color accountant's favor. Janelle ushered me into a dusty conference room stacked with banker boxes and a squeaky cart bearing 3 binders labeled 2023 meeting minutes. She slid me a visitor log to sign and left me alone for exactly 1 hour, per the statute. My eyes darted straight to the financials. Buried in vendor invoices was a $9,200 line item reading Sunrise Aquatic Habitat Consultation, Phase 1. The vendor address? Margot's cousin's backyard business. He was neither a biologist nor licensed contractor. Google said he taught middle school chemistry until last year. Another payment of $3,100 went to Phone Spoon LLC for automated outreach service, the robocall platform. Both had been rubber-stamped by Treasurer Shelley in neat cursive. I cross-referenced dates. The robocall contract kicked off exactly 1 week before the first 5 a.m. ring. My heart thumped. Clear conflict of interest, potential embezzlement, harassment funding, all in one neat paper trail. I scanned every page with a mobile app, double-checked resolution, and uploaded to a secure cloud folder titled Tempest. Next, I skimmed the minutes for the rule authorizing pond inspections. The vote passed 3-2, citing Environmental Emergency Protocol, but the minutes listed no supporting documents, no expert letter, no external agency warning. I snapped photos of the voting record. During my final 10 minutes, Janelle popped in to ask if I needed coffee. I declined, but chatted her up about general dissatisfaction. She rolled her eyes and whispered the board was on a power trip, and she'd overheard them brag that the pond project would be the new cash cow. She begged me not to quote her, so I promised anonymity and later typed myself a memo, staff acknowledgement of potential fraud. Driving home, I plotted. The State Attorney General's office handles HOA fraud complaints, but cases can drag. A quicker route would be presenting evidence at the next open board meeting and forcing it into the public record. HOA bylaws require the secretary to include any resident statement verbatim if presented in writing. A recorded resident statement becomes part of the permanent minutes, legally discoverable. Perfect. I drafted a 7-page statement titled Resident Concerns Regarding Unauthorized Expenditures and Harassment Practices. It included exact invoices, robocall logs, and quotes from bylaws. I referenced the dollar amounts twice because money sticks in people's minds, and footnoted the harassment statute. Then I printed 30 copies, one for each chair in the meeting room, plus a few spare. Thursday night arrived damp and warm, one of those evenings where cicadas sound like old lawnmowers. The rec center hall filled early, folks drawn by a rumor that something juicy was coming. I took a seat in the second row, letting the board see my folder tabbed in highlighter yellow. Margot wore a pink blazer and the smug look of someone expecting applause. During the open comment period, I stood, stated my lot number, and handed my packet to the secretary. Per bylaw 3.1-F, please attach my written statement unabridged to tonight's minutes. I turned to the residents, lifted another copy, and said, I have evidence of unauthorized spending and harassment sponsored by this board. The room inhaled as one. Shelley tried to gavel me quiet, claiming defamation. I kept reading, calm, my voice level as when dictating contract clauses. I outlined the robocall invoices, the cousin's fake consultancy, the absent expert citations. Then I played the latest 5 a.m. voicemail on speaker. Margot's chirpy request for a gate code echoed off the cinderblock walls. Goosebumps prickled my arms even though I'd heard it 20 times. When I finished, I thanked everyone and sat. Silence lasted 4 heavy seconds. Then Delilah, sweet 70-year-old Delilah, stood and said, "This is unacceptable." Her voice shook, but anger steadied it. Others murmured in agreement. Someone clapped. The meeting dissolved into chaos, motions to suspend the pond program, demands to audit finances, calls for board resignation. The vice chair Bert tried to adjourn. A resident lawyer named Kayla jumped up with her phone flashlight on the bylaws. Adjournment requires 2/3 vote if outstanding motions are on the table. She counted hands. Bert paled. He lost the vote. Margot looked at Shelley. Shelley looked at the floor. By 10:15 p.m., the board voted 4-1, Margot dissenting, to halt the inspection program pending an independent audit and to disable all robocalls immediately. Part of me felt victorious already, but my revenge meter hadn't quite hit poetic. I wanted them to taste the full flavor of consequences, not just a slap on the wrist and a note in the minutes. And my koi still hadn't forgiven the 5 a.m. disturbances. I woke late on Friday. 7:02 a.m. felt decadent after a week of involuntary dawn alarms, and discovered my phone blessedly silent. Evidently, the robocall contract really had been yanked overnight. I celebrated by dropping an extra cube of watermelon into the pond. The koi fluttered like confetti, but calm never lasts when petty people feel cornered. At noon, a certified letter arrived. It was a notice of proposed fine for obstructing an HOA program necessary to mitigate potential mosquito infestation. The amount? $100 per missed inspection dating back 6 mornings. The envelope included a photo of my locked gate scrawled with a timestamp. Someone had stood outside at 4:58 a.m., flash illuminating the wood, just to snap evidence they knew would be pointless by nightfall. The letter demanded payment within 10 days or the fine would convert to a property lien. I laughed out loud, then scanned the notice into my file named Threats. Fining me for an already suspended program violated their own emergency motion. That meant whoever issued the notice did so after the board meeting, likely acting alone. The signature at the bottom confirmed it. Treasurer Shelley, acting under executive privilege. I pictured her hunched over a desktop printer, justifying it as holding the line, while the paint dried on her ill-conceived empire. That evening, I called Kayla, the resident lawyer, and asked if she'd glance at the notice. She agreed, mostly out of curiosity. 20 minutes later, she rang back, half amused, half incredulous. "It's unenforceable," she said. "If they try to lien you without board approval, the county clerk will kick it. Want me to draft a cease and desist?" "I'd love that," I replied. "But let's add one twist." I told her about Josh's suggestion, small claims harassment order, and the invoices funding the robocalls. Kayla's laugh was pure glee. "We'll file both, double-barreled. She volunteered pro bono. Apparently, the board's nonsense had canceled her niece's driveway basketball dream early in the season, and she'd been itching for payback. While Kayla prepared motions, I focused on the independent audit the board had reluctantly approved. If they hired another of Margot's relatives, the whole process would be a whitewash. So I phoned Tyrone Weaver, a forensic accountant who'd once untangled a payment dispute for my glass company. Tyrone loved puzzles that ended with someone in handcuffs, or at least jobless. He perused the invoices I emailed and whistled. This is low-grade grift, but it's still grift. If the board stalls, holler. I'll testify. Monday night, a week after the chaotic meeting, flyers appeared on every porch. Special HOA election. Vote of no confidence. The document cited bylaw 2.5, which allows members to recall board officers with a 60% majority. I hadn't printed those flyers. Delilah had, with a stack of neon paper left over from her days making choir recital programs. Word spreads faster than robocalls when retirees taste rebellion. Margot attempted damage control. On the association's private social feed, she posted a paragraph full of bureaucratic haze, suggesting that outside agitators were spreading inaccurate fiscal narratives. The comments section turned feral. Residents asked about the non-existent CDC memo and why a middle school chem teacher charged nearly 10 grand for fish advice. Margot's replies shrank to one-line deflections and finally silent emoji reactions. By dinner, her account went inactive. 2 days later, the management company circulated an official notice. Independent auditor selected, Weaver Forensic Services. I let out a victory whoop. Apparently, the board had tried to hire a cut-rate firm from 3 states over, but 3/4 of homeowners emailed objections after someone, Delilah again, stealth legend, distributed Tyrone's resume. A management company VP decided the headache wasn't worth defending and signed off on Tyrone. Shelley retaliated with paperwork. On my doorstep, I found a second certified letter, this one claiming exigent circumstances to enter my property for mosquito abatement. She scheduled pest control contractors for the upcoming Saturday at, of course, 5 a.m. The letter stated any obstruction would incur cumulative fines. It was laughable, but also a live threat. Pest control techs showing up uninvited could cut my fence or dump larvicide into the pond. So I took a preemptive strike. Thursday morning, I filed for a temporary restraining order at the county courthouse, naming the HOA as an entity and Shelley as its acting agent. I attached robocall logs, the board meeting minutes, and both threatening letters. The clerk stamped a hearing date. Friday at 3 p.m., I texted Josh. He adjusted his patrol schedule so he could testify about the calls if needed. Court staff hallways on a Friday feel half school and half DMV. Fluorescent lighting, scuffed linoleum, people fanning stacks of forms like playing cards. My case was third on the docket. Shelley arrived in a peach pantsuit, clutching a binder so stuffed its rings gaped. She'd come solo, no lawyer, probably banking on homeowners cowering, not litigating. When the judge read the summary and heard the timestamps of 5 a.m. calls, his eyebrows formed a single disapproving line. Shelley argued the calls were association courtesy notices. The judge interrupted. Courtesy occurs during reasonable hours. Josh testified next, crisp in uniform, explaining standard harassment thresholds. I capped with printed bylaws highlighting the emergency-only inspection rule. The judge granted the restraining order for 60 days pending full hearing, specifically barring any HOA contracted vendor from accessing my lot without written invitation. He also warned Shelley that further pre-dawn contact could incur contempt. As we exited, Shelley muttered something about overkill. I replied, "Overkill is a pond net strong enough to stop raccoons. This is just consequence." Saturday morning dawned peacefully. No contractors, no calls. I weeded the iris bed while the koi darted after gnats like little torpedoes. Neighborhood kids scootered past my drive and waved. Word of court orders travels fast among cul-de-sac pundits. I noticed phones raised at intervals. Photos for an informal victory scrapbook. Meanwhile, Tyrone began the audit. He requested 3 years of ledgers and vendor contracts. Janelle from management company emailed me on the side. They're sweating. According to her, Bert spent an entire morning feeding receipts into a scanner while Margot paced dictating context notes. Tyrone asked for raw bank statements instead. The special election loomed, scheduled for the following Thursday evening in the same hall where the uprising sparked. Ballots would be counted on site, proxies allowed with notarization. Delilah organized a shuttle for elderly residents. Kayla printed flyers summarizing audit red flags. I baked brownie trays because sugar aligns people faster than speeches. Election night crackled with anticipation. Even folks who never attended meetings showed up, lugging folding chairs and reusable water bottles as though for a community theater premiere. Shelley was absent, perhaps advised by management to avoid open mics, but Margot and Bert took seats behind the folding table labeled Board. The votes were simple yes-no slips dropped into a clear acrylic box. 3 community volunteers, none linked to any faction, tallied while we watched. Tyrone, present as impartial auditor, verified counts. The results took 15 minutes that felt like an hour. Final tally, 82%, no confidence. Gasps, then cheers, then the peculiar hush when a power structure topples, and people look around wondering what comes next. Bylaw procedure required immediate resignation. Failing that, the membership could motion to remove. Before anyone spoke, Margot tapped the microphone, cheeks blotched crimson. She announced she was stepping down for personal reasons. Bert echoed her within seconds. Their exits were as anticlimactic as a ringtone cutting off mid-chorus. An interim committee formed on the spot, appointing Kayla as chair until regular elections. Punishment Part 1 secured, public ouster. Yet my sense of closure demanded one more chapter, financial reckoning. 2 weeks later, Tyrone completed the audit. It detailed $22,487 in dubious expenses, spanning pond inspections, robocalls, and consulting stipends, to Bert's brokerage for property valuation projections. Kayla distributed the report with a cover letter recommending civil recovery actions and referral to the state attorney general. The new interim board voted unanimously to forward the file to law enforcement and to seek restitution from those responsible. Their insurance policy covered fraud losses, but stipulated the carrier would pursue the perpetrators for reimbursement. Translation: Margot, Bert, and Shelley faced premium lawsuits from a company whose specialty was clawing back every cent plus interest. Around that time, I received handwritten apologies from 2 former board members, minor ones who'd resigned earlier in the year. They admitted they'd been steamrolled, thanked me for being braver. I stuck the notes to my fridge beside photos of Coy. One lingering nuisance remained: the bogus fines Shelley had assessed. Though unenforceable under lien law, they still sat as charges on my HOA portal. I emailed Janelle, kindly purge. She replied 30 minutes later with a screenshot. The balance was 0 and the line item stamped canceled. Life drifted toward normal. The koi fattened on summer insects. Delilah's pergola earned approval after a simple repaint, and the basketball hoop on Juniper Court resurrected with the board's blessing. But there was an epilogue I hadn't planned, courtesy of Shelley. A month after the election, I received a subpoena. Shelley's defense attorney wanted me deposed for her probable cause hearing. Apparently, she intended to argue she'd relied on professional guidance when approving invoices and issuing fines. Her cousin's fish consultant would claim expert status. The robocall firm would characterize Dawn Outreach as standard. My testimony, the lawyer believed, would actually help by showing Shelley meant no personal harm, had simply followed procedure. Kayla laughed so hard coffee came out her nose when I forwarded the email. "They want you as a friendly witness?" she asked between coughs. "You're the complainant, but depositions are mandatory with subpoena unless quashed, and quashing takes time." I decided to attend. Courtroom oxygen is where narratives meet sunlight. On deposition day, I wore the same forgettable khakis from the records inspection. Symbolic bookends. Shelley's attorney, a polished man named Vaughn, opened gently, trying to paint me as a fastidious rule keeper whose gate obsession forced the HOA into drastic measures. I answered calmly, citing bylaw numbers, confirming I'd offered alternative inspection times, stating fact after fact until Vaughn's smile thinned. He asked if I'd felt personally attacked. I replied, "Woken at 5 a.m. 6 consecutive mornings against my wishes? Yes. That qualifies." He moved on. The kicker arrived when Vaughn presented a photocopy of the notice with Shelley's signature. He asked if I acknowledged receiving it. "Yes," I said. "And I'm grateful, because her signature proves the fine was her sole action. Board approval had been rescinded already." Tyrone's audit appendix showing the meeting minutes was Exhibit B. Vaughn's pen froze. He realized too late he'd authenticated the very document that undermined Shelley's procedural reliance defense. 2 weeks after, the county prosecutor filed misdemeanor fraud counts against Shelley and Bert. Civil actions stacked separately. Margot struck a plea for cooperation, aiming to save her real estate license. Shelley's job at a local accounting firm evaporated. Ethical conduct clause. Bert's brokerage dropped him. Clients dislike headlines involving fraud. Meanwhile, the interim board scheduled fresh elections. I had zero desire to be on it, but I volunteered for the finance committee, mostly to ensure future invoices didn't funnel coy money into someone's cousin's Venmo. The new board also voted to amend the bylaws. Any inspection must offer 3 appointment windows, none earlier than 7 a.m., and no gate keys may be requested, only temporary escort access. One Saturday in early fall, Delilah wheeled a cooler across my lawn. Inside floated cupcakes decorated like tiny koi, icing scales shimmering. A handful of neighbors followed carrying folding chairs. We staged an impromptu liberation luau, feeding fish, swapping war stories, and laughing at how a small pond became a big wave. As dusk painted the water gold, I realized the best revenge wasn't the fines reversed or the lawsuits pending. It was the neighborhood itself, reset to something almost communal, people chatting instead of dodging citations. My koi flicked their tails in lazy circles, blissfully ignorant of bylaws, unaware they'd starred in a saga. But if they could understand, I think they'd approve how I guarded the gate. The neighborhood settled into a rhythm so ordinary it felt suspicious, like a stage still bright long after the actor's exit. Mailboxes stayed blissfully postcard-free, and the only ringing at dawn came from Wren's. I almost forgot the soundtrack of robocalls until the court date for my small claims harassment case popped up on my calendar. Kayla insisted I let her drive. "Juries love a tidy timeline," she said, thrusting a color-coded binder at me as we parked. Inside were screenshots of every 5 a.m. call, the restraining order, and Tyrone's audit summary highlighting the phone spoon invoices. We weren't facing a jury, just a clerk magistrate, but organization never hurts. Shelley showed up with a public defender because her private lawyer fled once criminal charges dropped. Minus her old blazer, she looked small, gripping a metal water bottle like a shield. After a brisk reminder to stay polite, the magistrate let me describe 6 pre-dawn robocalls, play 2 voicemails, and present a $412.60 bill for lost wages and ruined koi feed. Shelley claimed dawn calls were protocol, but produced no bylaw. 10 minutes later, the magistrate awarded full damages, added fees, and barred any HOA phone contact before 8. Outside, Kayla breathed, "1 down, 2 to go." Those 2 were restitution suits. Bert had funneled vendor money through his brokerage. Margot had hired her cousin to fake pond inspections. Their professional licenses now dangled. The interim board, soon dubbed the Transition Council, posted every invoice over $250 online. Residents who once ignored budgets began reading spreadsheets like thrillers. Accountability spread. Next, the county launched community service for low-level offenders. Margot's name topped the algae-scraping roster. 3 Saturdays, 5 a.m., knee-deep in pond muck. Neighbors shared photos labeled Margot Standard Time. Winter hearings followed. Tyrone, our forensic accountant, proved Bert's consulting was kickbacks. A judge called it budget Velcro, fined him $18,000, and banned him from HOA boards for 3 years. Shelley pleaded no contest, lost her CPA license for 2, and owed $7,200 under wage garnishment. Settlement checks trickled in by December, half paid for LED streetlights, half trimmed next year's dues. Morale soared. Kayla proposed a spring garden and waterway walk. Teens built kiosks about dragonflies. I ran a biofilter demo. While aiming a spotlight, I found koi eggs, new life matching new leadership. The walk drew a crowd. Shelley appeared timidly with an envelope, her first repayment check. Gazing at the fish, she whispered, "They look peaceful." I replied, "Balance does that." She nodded and left. We raised $6,000 for the Youth Conservation Corps and booked next year's encore. Then a flipper painted the entrance house neon coral. Under the old board, that shade would have triggered fines. Now we negotiated. Lance agreed to softer trim and sage shrubs, proving compromise beats crackdowns. Insurance tried a 30% premium hike. We divided tasks. Delilah gathered rival quotes. I compiled risk stats. Kayla found an engagement discount. Tyrone bundled a green space grant. Lance charmed an underwriter. 2 weeks later, we secured a cheaper policy than before the scandal. The Attorney General scheduled fraud hearings. Plea deals loomed. Restitution, probation, no jail if payments kept coming. Consequences without collapse. A gardening magazine asked to feature the HOA that fixed itself. Sunrise photos showed Delilah feeding a toddler beside coral trim half hidden by sage. The August article praised our democracy of fences. Even Shelley, unidentified, appeared in a sidebar on restitution as rehabilitation. Elections approached. Kayla and I declined. An engineer named Miriam won unopposed. Her first act, write a 7 a.m. earliest contact rule into the deed restrictions. Applause rattled windows. Fall routines felt refreshingly dull. Gutter approvals, leaf pickup schedules, chili cook-off planning. Miriam asked, "How do we avoid backsliding?" We created a rotating audit committee chosen by lot each year. Ponds need filters, so do communities. Volunteers rotate every quarter, reading bank statements aloud during live streams so nobody can claim ignorance. The simple ritual is half transparency, half campfire storytelling, and it keeps the books cleaner than any rule Margot ever waived. Lessons learned, water clear. Halloween debuted, gates open night. LED pumpkins floated on my pond. Kids squealed. Margot, now humbler, watched the koi and accepted candy without complaint. Winter settled. A clerk mailed me Shelley's final repayment plus interest. I endorsed it to the Conservation Corps and texted her thanks. She replied she'd enrolled in nonprofit accounting night classes to rebuild trust. I wished her luck. New Year's Eve, we gathered by the pond with hot chocolate. At midnight, biodegradable confetti melted on the water, and fish darted after the ripples. Neighbors toasted stable dues and functional democracy. Later, I locked my gate, the click feeling like punctuation, not barricade. Before bed, I wrote, "Security isn't silence, it's knowing you'll be heard at sunrise." The pumps hummed like applause and sleep came easy, confident any rogue 5 a.m. call would awaken the whole neighborhood. Friends, thank you. See you soon.